All right, well, yes, Kiwi accent. You got me in one. You all have to owe me an apology for the sailing. Pretty pissed off about that. America's Cup, for those of you who didn't notice, it was on here some weeks ago. There's a very lewd joke I can share with you about Kiwi sailors, which at the bar at 5:30 we can talk about. But for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about proposals. So I want to make sure we're all still awake after lunch. We're all in B2B sales, I know that. Who writes proposals to sell their product? Keep your hands up. Proposals. All right, very good. All right, you're all right. And the rest of you, I suspect, are wrong. Because every written communication you have with a prospect or customer is a proposal of sorts. So if you're sending a quote, it's a proposal. So what I'm going to share with you today is relevant to all of us, right? And at some stage, you're going to be competing with a very well-resourced company, the Oracles, the Microsofts, now the Boxes. We've got an army of people available to help with proposal writing. The desktop publishers, the graphic artists, we've got dedicated people that edit the content. And what I'm going to share with you are guerrilla tactics you can use to outflank these folks. Because you won't beat them head-to-head. There's no way. They've got more resources. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context where I'm coming from. This is my career. You'll see the first half of my career was characterized by working for very large organizations. Albeit in a small country. I was in New Zealand, Australia. And we talk about that as one country these days. And both got sheep. EDS, when I was working for EDS, we had 140,000 employees worldwide and 2,000 in little old New Zealand, one of the largest employers. So when I went for a bid at EDS, they were typically very large contracts, $20 million outsourcing contracts. And I would have a bid budget because we costed out how much it took to go after a piece of business to get it validated. I'd spend $500,000 trying to win a piece of business. Can you imagine that? Some of you haven't got that much funding. And we spent that on one bid. So competing against those companies is what I tried to get very, very good at. And you can see after that, I worked with far smaller companies. When I joined Salesforce.com in 2005, there were 6 of us in all of Asia Pacific. We worked from home. And the rule was, if you had to ring headquarters, you used a VoIP calling card because we couldn't justify the expense of the cell phone. So it was early days. And then on to Yammer, and now it's scripted. So the techniques I'm sharing with you today, I've used ever since EDS, very, very effectively, and it applies to all sizes of companies. In fact, if you're one of these larger companies, you can use them, but I would consider them being used for evil. So let's start with a little story. I've got 15 minutes, so I'm going to speak fairly quickly. Story goes that in 2006, there was a Telecom New Zealand tender that came out, the largest telco in the country. Ourselves, Microsoft, and Oracle were invited to tender. And it seemed a little one-sided, not only because we had no staff in New Zealand to address the bid, not only because Oracle and Microsoft were already getting millions of dollars out of telecom each year, but it turned out that Microsoft's preferred partner for the deal to do the proposal was a subsidiary of Telecom. In fact, 60% of the seats that they were buying were to go to that subsidiary. Do you see what I'm getting at? So they're actually asking themselves to bid, in effect. So guerrilla tactic number 1. If you're not sure whether you should be in a bid, and here's why you should not be sure. If you think that you're column fodder, does anyone know what column fodder is? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Column fodder is when I'm a large company, I think I know who I should be buying from, but I need to create contestability. So I invite Salesforce.com and other unknown companies to put a bid in. I'm pretty much going to ignore them. I know they're there just for show, but at the end of it I can say I chose Oracle against everyone in the market. This was the best choice in the market. Be very careful that you don't become column fodder. So the way to test for that takes a bit of gumption. As I wrote a very, very polite note and explained why we declined to bid and the reasons why we weren't the right choice for them. Good ploy, because if we were column fodder, I'd lost nothing. I wasn't column fodder. So what happened was the COO, a fellow who had a 5,000-person business unit, PA wrote a note, said, I need to talk to you and tell you why you should be in this business. And I wrote back and said, I'll take the meeting, that's great, I appreciate it, but what I need, the outcome I'm looking for from this meeting is why we will win. Right? He said, sure. I then freaked out because I thought if we get in this and we lose it, Mark Benioff at the time, he had his fingers on everything, he would kill me. So then I ring up Mark on his cell phone and I say, Mark, I need you to be on this call because I need the COO to tell us why we're going to win and I need your sponsorship, blah, blah. He's in his car on his cell phone. He goes, yeah, okay, cool, patch him through. I said, Mark, he runs a 5,000 person. I can't patch him through, but we'll book a meeting, we'll do it. He says, oh, okay, cool. And those are the days you could get him on the phone, and it was a great cover your ass exercise. So if you're in mid-sized companies, you want to make sure you should never lose a deal alone, right? Don't win alone, don't lose alone. Doug's nodding his head, right? Get the CEO involved, and then no one's blamed, right? So we had the call, and he convinced us why we should take the deal, which is amazing. So I won't get into the detail, but the net of it was, he gave me all my selling points. You're going to win because. We like you because. Anything else? And what do you think of it? And that was my proposal, pretty much done in about 15 minutes, right? So that hurdle was passed, and then it still didn't really feel like a fair competition to me, because as it turns out, Oracle had 3 times as many people dedicated to this 6-month bid as we had in all of Asia Pacific in our company. They had 17 people, and this was my team. Myself, a guy called Steve Bukeisen, who's a sales engineer, and a good friend of ours, Ben Smith. That was it. And we were going to take these guys on. So we had to do it now. I told Mark we're going to do it. So I'm going to take you through the process in a moment that we used. We started with competitive analysis, figured out our strategy statements, and then set about changing the rules. Because as I said earlier, if you're going to compete against a giant, don't go head-to-head, because they've got more weight than you. They will beat you. But the net of it was, in the end, we won the largest deal in the quarter. We used minimum viable word count, as I like to call it, because we had no resources, right? And there are my 2 favorite things about this deal in the end. Number 1 was, I still have a copy of the email that Mark sent me at the time, just as we were doing negotiations, saying, Matt, this is the worst deal I have ever seen. You guys need to learn how to sell value. Quote 1. Point 2 was, we won the largest deal that Salesforce did in the world that quarter, and we were on the earnings announcement. So it can't have been that bad, right? Deal done. I said to the telecom guys, was it obvious there were only 3 of us? I told them afterwards, right? Was it obvious? And they said, yeah, it was really obvious. But in a good way, because every word we wrote, every comment we made, every value proposition we put to them was bang on the money, and I'm going to help you understand how to do that. So let's get into it. This is the process I'm going to work through, right? Some of you are not process people. You're like, ugh. Some of you I don't expect to note the process down. This will be available afterwards too, so you don't have to try and record it. But there'll be little nuggets, little guerrilla tactics we use, you can use in your everyday life, just including in to and fro emails. So first thing, prospect intelligence. Standard stuff for most of it. Everyone knows you should do this. In enterprise selling, it becomes easier because you've got publicly listed companies with externally facing documentation. So there's one, I don't want to go on about this, I'm sure we know how to do it. The one point I do want to make is the Form 10K, which is the annual disclosure form that publicly listed companies are required to put out. There's a section in there called Qualitative and Quantitative Analysis and Disclosure of Risk. Right? Why is that interesting? It's the executives covering their butts and saying all these numbers, all these great plans we have, here's why we could fail. And what do you think they think about every week? That stuff, right? So if you can contribute to mitigating that, you're on a winner. So for an unsolicited proposal, if I think I should do business with Unilever, what am I going to do? I'm going to go look at that, figure out what they're scared of, and then tell them how I can fix it. I don't need them to request a proposal for that. Now, on the right-hand side, we all use LinkedIn. Everybody uses it. It's great. It's fantastic. The guerrilla tip I want to share with you, try this out. Next time you're researching a prospect, look at all the references they've given and received. I don't know anyone who does this. Have a really good look at it. So I'm at Scripted, and we sell to chief marketing officers. What I do is I look at the references, and if they've given a reference to an agency or a freelance consultant, that's a very interesting signal to me. I now know that they use external agents, and they have relationships and biases. So I'm starting to learn about how they think. And if I get in a contestable situation, I need to know how to address that. Now, thank them. You know, here's why you could, or here are the instances where you should use independent contractors or content marketing agencies, and here's why you might consider working with us. References on LinkedIn, really important. Key individuals. I want to make one more point on them. When we talk about the CFO or the CMO, every time I talk to a rep about it, and they're trying to internalize it, they talk in abstract. They talk about, CMOs talk about this, and they talk about that, blah, blah, blah. But if you ask them, how many CMOs do you actually know personally? That you've actually had a non-business discussion or casual discussion with? Most reps will say none. Right? I just sell to them. You know? However, if you're in a mid-sized company and you sell to chief financial officers, I bet you have one of those sitting 2 desks down. If you're not that big, Someone in your advisory or board network will know someone, and here's my pro tip too. Go and have a coffee with them, have lunch with them. Find out, what does their workflow look like? What's their day? First thing they come in the morning, what do they think about? What do they need to achieve? How are they measured in their role? What does success look like as a CFO? And what are the biggest risks to your success? You won't get all that from a prospect. Never, never, never. So go find a friendly, hopefully someone inside your company. And if you're in a deal and you happen to have a CFO in your company, run your proposal past them. This is the messaging we're using. This is how we're trying to convince them to take our services. Does this resonate with you? What could I improve? All right, moving forward. Let's talk about competitive analysis. So looking away from the customer for the moment, I encourage you to create a grid that looks like this. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but you must understand your competitors. And the first thing is, understand their offerings. How broad are their offerings? Many of us offer a narrower solution than the customer may want, right? Back in the day at Salesforce, we were very, very good at Salesforce automation. Absolutely horrible at marketing automation. Customer service and support early on, horrible. We would go into deals and they want a CRM, which is all of those things, and we were competing against people that had all those things. So our job was to convince the customer to be best of breed. Go pick the best in each one of those three. So you need to understand where you fit into that. Style. Style is very important. We were selling to Telecom New Zealand, and what we found out through Intel, friends in the company, is the Oracle guys dressed like this with ties and dark suits and whatever else, and were very professional, Aidan, and intimidated the heck out of the team. They made the team feel dumb. That's how good the sales team were. So we picked up on that, and it's not hard for me to make people feel smart, so that worked. And we're very casual and approachable. So think about style, and it needs to differ client by client, and the language you use. You also need to know who their existing customers are and their target markets. So if I'm trying to sell to Telecom New Zealand, and I find out that Oracle has 50 telcos around the world, that's a problem for me. I probably won't bid, right? If I don't have a very strong referenceable customer base there as well. And know those customers and know whether they really are referenceable, because all of us have examples where you'll see a logo on a site, but you've got friends that work there and they go, oh, we hate those guys. They suck. That's gold. When you find, I've done this, that's gold. So what you do is you seed it with them. Are friendly and things. So you know, it's fair. Oracle does have a lot of experience, and one of their big customers is Acme Corp. But you know what? You should talk to Acme Corp, and I happen to know someone there, and plant it with them, right? I'm all about transparency. Talk to their customers, talk to my customers. A powerful tool. Right, having done that, we're almost through our competitive analysis, but we need to understand what's going to matter to the client. If you're competing for a piece of government business or a very large company with sophisticated procurement, they'll give you this. And if they're any good, they give it to you in a weighted list. So here's an example, perhaps for a technology decision, and they'll tell you in ranked, stacked order, here's how we're going to evaluate your proposal. If they don't do that, or if it's an unsolicited proposal, so you've gone to someone, you're trying to sell them a solution, you need to say to them, look, what are going to be the key decision criteria to make a decision? Right? And how much do you care about A, B versus C? Get those stacked up, and then you need to have a very honest assessment of yours versus the others. Right? Don't get your marketers, don't get your marketing team to assess your capability in each of these feature or attribute areas, because they're going to inflate it, right? Be really raw and honest, because then what you're going to do is create a strategy statement, which you'll see in a moment, about minimizing your weaknesses and maximizing your strengths. I promise we'll do questions at the end, so if I'm going fast, we'll catch up. Strategy statements are as simple as these. These few words really, really help and are powerful. It guides your content, and if someone's helping you with the document, it guides their content and changes the way you think. From this point, for the rest of the conversation, I'm going to be using, pretending that I'm from the Graham Bell telephone company in the 1800s, and I'm trying to sell this newfangled thing, the telephone, and I'll use that context as we're trying to sell to Acme. So my strategy statement for the top one might be, knowing the customer cares about real-time collaboration and communication, we will maximize our strengths in real-time communication by highlighting our speed and reliability. Because this new telephone is very fast, it connects you instantly, and it's very reliable, right? And so forth and so on. And you'll notice that the bottom ones are about addressing the customer. So if they do have strong telco strength, how do we neutralize that? How do we water down their value propositions and the things they consider to be strong? And one of the ways you do, gorilla point. If they say, I'm very good at... we're feature rich, we've got 1 million features, we can do anything you want. then you need in your proposal to weave through the messaging that simplicity and speed to deployment is the most important thing for the customer. And then Oracle goes, excuse me for using Oracle, Oracle's great, but I don't keep using them. Oracle goes pouring in, and their strategy and their thing is we know we're the best. We've got the greatest feature-rich set, blah, 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 and they just hammer at, and they're shooting at the wrong target because you've moved the goalposts and they didn't know. Super important. If you don't outflank by doing these things, you will get beaten. Rightio, that gets us to our solution worksheet, and the last thing before we start writing content. So now you've got your strategy stuff worked out. I'm assuming you know what the customer's hot buttons are from the attribute list. So real-time collaboration is our hot button. I'm going to propose our telephony system. And here's something I don't see a lot of people doing, and one of the most powerful things I've done in proposals before. I use ghost messaging, I call it, for taking down the competition without referencing them directly at all. So, for example, I know that the competitors to my phone system are smoke signals, tin cans, and postal mail. So in my proposal, I say, I'm proposing the Graham Bell telephony system. It works like this, and here are the benefits. We considered proposing to you smoke signals, but we chose not to because of the unreliability of them with the San Francisco wind, right? And I haven't mentioned my competitor once. So if you can credibly say that you could have offered this alternative, do so. That's the best way to do it. The second best way to do it is like we did at Salesforce. We are only hosted. You can't get on-premise Salesforce. So I said in my telecom proposal, we considered providing you with an on-premise hosted solution through a partner, but we chose not to because we realized that would really lengthen deployment and make it much more risky in terms of the integration required. So we're not going to do that because that's bad for you. We could have, chose not to. Right? You see where I'm going? Haven't talked about my competitor once, and I've completely pulled the rug out from underneath their feet. Used ghost messaging. Discriminators are the things that I believe are going to make us successful in the bid against Oracle. So reliability and speed were the key things that I went after. Same for the Graham Bell company here. So that's part of our theme, our vision statement, our messaging all the way through the thing. And for every hot button or solution benefit combination I need, proof. How do I have proof? Proof that I've done it before, I've got experience in the team, or I've got performance metrics, or even better. You know, Megacorp achieved this. And where this gets to is it provides you with all the input you need for the content creation. The first thing you do, like writing a novel, is you write the headings. Put your hand up if anyone's feeling an emotional response from this list of title topics. Surprising. Okay, no engineers in the room? Okay, so this is what you might get from the customer, right? They'll provide you with this. It also might be what you write in an unsolicited proposal, because this is kind of what comes naturally to us, right? We do this. But how would it be if you wrote an index list that actually is a narrative of its own, and it reinforced your messaging? So try this, for example. Instead of writing audit trail, I write, all calls will be recorded as events and audit logs provided. I don't even need to read the content. I get it. Right? As an executive, maybe that's all I need, right? So I skim through there, and then here's an interesting one. The Bell Graham party line, guerrilla tip for you. Turn a weakness into a feature. So some of you are old enough to remember that telephones at home, you're talking, and your damn sister picks up the phone, you're like, hee, talk to his girlfriend. Because you can listen in on the same line, right? That's a problem for us. So we called it a feature. We call it the party line, which will allow them to listen in on any calls. Brilliant. So take that message and you'll see how that works out in the main proposal. All right. What if, however, it's a nasty government tender and they give you this great big spreadsheet and say, fill in the spreadsheet, don't deviate from the norm, anything outside of this will be discarded and ignored. Bugger. Here's how you cheat, guerrilla tactic. Everyone has a do you comply field in it, yes, no, or partial, and they give you a notes field, always, to explain your partial compliance. Hijack it. Use it, even if you do comply, use the notes field to reinforce a point, right? So I've done that here, right? Party line's amazing, it's fantastic. And then add a graphic as well. Where are these wonderful reinforcing graphics? Stick that in the cell, why not? No one said you can't, right? And graphics are important because they create feeling and emotion, right? Words, it's harder to pictures speak to people. So you can see what I've done here. There's my party line with folks listening in on my sister's calls and so forth and so on. And now we've written the bulk of our content. We're nearly at the final post. We have to write our executive summary. Point probably worth saying, never write your executive summary before you've written what you're summarizing. Another key point, I don't know how many proposals I've seen where the executive summary is really a cover letter. It's an introduction. We're so excited to be proposing for you. You're going to be a very valuable client. It's been a long-term relationship. It's fantastic. Now read the That's not a summary, right? It's a pleading sort of statement to read the rest of the document. It should actually summarize the entire document, right? I should receive one of these, be able to read it, and then put it down and be done with it, unless I'm not sure how you could do it, or I don't believe you. Then I go into the document and figure out how you're going to do it. Start to finish, it should include the price, the next steps, how you're going to engage, everything. And I talk about this in terms of a 4-box organizer. It should be obvious why. Box number 1 is a theme statement. And you can see here, put your hand up if you can't read it. Okay, good. I hate reading off the board. So you can see here that I've woven in my theme statements, right? And I've made a quantifiable statement or benefit to them with the 15% reduction in time to launch products. You get that. That gets their attention. Well, this sounds interesting. Then they'll read the rest of it. The next box is just their bullet points. You'll put a little paragraph to introduce it, and you literally bullet point the 3 top hot buttons they have in terms of the weighted assessment. And then word for word, you copy the top one and paste it underneath in bold and tell them how you're going to do it. So real-time collaboration, right? Here's our solution, the benefit to you. Here's proof we can do it. And then a visual of some sort, some graphic. And that's your little capsule. And you do that 3 times. And then you finish it with a little summary statement and next steps. The summary includes your pricing and who's going to be working on the deal. Really important. If you're doing systems integration or you have some sort of services component, tell them specifically, if you can, who you can do it and where they've been successful in the past. Little experience point. Okay, what does that actually look like? It looks something like this. This is an example of an executive summary. You see the formats as I described it. That's the first bullet point broken down into a solution summary. And when you look at this afterwards online, you'll be able to read through it and see how I've done that. Gorilla point. What if you don't have a graphic? You don't have the capability to, or it just doesn't make sense to put a graphic in. You still want something that's going to leave an impression with them. So I cheat and I use a quote framed like this. So this is kind of graphical, right? Got a picture of a human being that says something important. Best quote you can have, an existing customer, right? It's going to talk about why your solution's relevant to them. Next best quote you could have would be an analyst or someone who's influential in the industry. The third one, if no one's heard of you and no one cares about you, is one of your executives. Have them say how committed they are and why this is such a great partnership or something, right? Reinforcing your key message. Alrighty. And I'm getting close to time. Whoops, what have I just done? Let's put the screen back on if we can. Last point, graphics. Can everyone tell what that graphic's about? Yeah, employee engagement. Is it communicating anything to me? Not really. Almost every graphic I see is like this. It has a graphic, which if you could read the small print there, it's quite obviously an engagement summary. I don't need you to give me a bold point. What I want to know is so what? So this is a perfect place to put in one of your ghost messages or one of your theme statements to hammer the competition when you haven't been asked to. Right? So you've got a structured format or proposal you need to adhere to, and you can sneak this message in, and no one's going to penalize you for it. So how about that instead? Right? No one asked me for that information, but that's much more meaningful than the one on the left. Right? And as I said earlier, it's tied back to your win themes. In summary, what have we done very quickly? Got to understand your prospect, both at a firm and individual level. I gave you a couple of points. One was about researching the qualitative and quantitative disclosure of risk. One was about references for people. Second thing, deeply understand your competition and how to outflank them. You're not going to know the universe of your competition. You might not even know your competition, which is very, very bad. Good salespeople will always figure out how to ask who the competition is. And professional procurement people will always tell you because they want you to do your best job. I want to pick the best company to work with me, so I've got to know, I've got you to put your best foot forward. You tell me why you're better than Oracle, and I'm going to tell them I'm with Salesforce, and you tell me why, so forth and so on. So you really should understand that. We talked about ghost messages. Again, I'd love talking about that ad infinitum, so grab me later and we can talk about some techniques for doing that. Weave your messaging throughout the proposal in unlikely places. Put them under graphics, put them in the notes boxes, put them in pullouts, little quotes on the side of your documentation. And finally, you can use that 4-box organizer I showed you for unsolicited proposals. If you talk to the sales executives who work with me today, I know it started off tough, and I'm like, oh no, we don't send quotes anymore. We send proposals. Never ever send someone a price quote, because they get there and they have to think through the emotion they had at the time they spoke to you. Inevitably, they pass it to someone else. They don't have that emotion. write a proposal every time, right? And that 4-box organizer is a perfect way to think about a 1 or 2 page proposal that includes a quote. And that, my friends, is the end of my speech. No questions? No one could understand the accent. I knew it. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Hi there.
Yeah. So my question, you mentioned, obviously competing in big enterprise deals against a much bigger company. You mentioned using a sales engineer and the 3 people. If you had to recommend the structure for building that small, lean team, who are the absolute critical roles? Sales engineer, solution architect, VP of sales. What are the 3 critical roles, and how do they work together in a lean team in an enterprise?
Yeah, I can't answer that right now because I'll give you some thoughts, but because it depends on what you're selling, right? So if you're selling a low-touch service that doesn't require integration or whatever else, I'll give you a different answer. I guess the high-level answer is you obviously have to have a salesperson who owns it soup to nuts and make sure they understand that. At the end of the day, the quality of the output is owned by your sales executive. And if you're hiring somebody to sell to larger organizations, I would encourage you to find, and in your small organization, find somebody who's done what I have, has worked inside a large organization, understands how they work and how to communicate to them. Because if you just get somebody who's always been a startup, they don't get it. And I've had those folks working with me, they don't get it. So have the salesperson, and then really it's domain expertise. So whether that's in the form of solution architecture or services or consulting expertise, those are the 2 things. You need domain expertise and you need a salesperson. And then the rest of it's depends on your situation. Yeah. Yo.
Have you guys productized this process? Is there like a white paper or something that, because that's a lot of information to kind of follow the entire process?
Yeah, I kind of have. I've got a blog, you can find it, and I've actually written about pretty much all of this in a series of blog posts, which will probably get you through it. But again, as I said, this will be available, Max assures me, somewhere, and we'll find that. And if we get calls for additional expansion, I can probably fill it out. But today, no. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm curious to know how much relationships play a role in this, right? Because clearly you probably did some extra work there as well, not just like, the sheet that you handed over to them, the proposal you handed over. You also probably had some sort of more strategic relationship. If you could talk a little bit about what kind of role the relationship plays in the process, and then if you are a smaller team, what's a great way to kind of, either grab their attention or start to establish a deeper relationship with the prospect?
Okay, long topic. I'll try and keep my answer really short. So the first thing is, you win as a team. We talked about that. So you've got to figure out how to leverage the various roles and your advisors, if you're a small company, and board members and investors to help you with your relationships. I think about relationships in multi-tier fashion. And then what I do with a large bid team, we didn't talk bid management because that's a whole other topic, but you actually have to line up responsibility for relationship development. So your engineers, for example, in telecom, there are a whole bunch of technical folks that would never ever trust a thing that comes out of my mouth. He's a sales guy, no way. So I said to Steve, your job is to become their buddy and become a trusted advisor. And the way he did that was not at all to talk about our bid. It was to monitor what they were doing online and finding out what groups they were in and seeing that they were into, I don't know, the Python group or the Mongo, whatever they're into, and just send them helpful stuff. Hey, saw this new development in MongoDB, blah, 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 whatever, and helping them at a personal level. That's consistent with every level of our sales process and sales team. So the minute I'm engaged in a sales process, I'm thinking about how can I help you personally today? And I keep doing that. And if I have aspirations to work with Unilever today and we're not ready to talk to them, I find people I want to help. In fact, it's just a life rule, right? A life rule is just be helpful. And so that's how I think about it. So to get those relationships, you figure out how you can contribute to their individual goals in a way that's non-salesy and make sure everybody understands who their responsibility, where the responsibility lies. So sales guy can't be friends to the lowest person in the totem and the top because there's no credibility in that, right? So if I'm a CMO and I hang out with CMO-like people and you're hanging out with the person who reports to me, I don't consider you a peer. So that kind of dirties the relationship. Helpful?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Cool. And I think we're done. Yeah? All right, thanks.